Rhonda Green had a long day at work and was looking forward to a nice quiet evening at home. Her husband, Jake, has been away on business for the past 2 days and will be gone for 2 more days. At least that's what he told her. She knew he was in Dallas, about a 2-hour drive from their home in Wichita Falls, and she had his hotel room number there. But she was not entirely convinced that he spent all his evenings alone. She remembered their 7-year marriage. Everything between them started out great. The first 5 years were wonderful, and they both looked forward to the birth of their first child. Then she had a miscarriage. They hugged each other, cried a lot, but got through it. Then the doctor said he found a cyst on one of her ovaries. They had surgeries, yes. She ended up having both ovaries removed, which meant they wouldn't be able to have children. There was more crying followed by counseling. They both wanted children, but now it seemed like the only thing that could happen was if they adopted a child. Rhonda was fine with that, but Jake always wanted kids of his own. Despite consultations, things went downhill for them. Of course, they still loved each other, but something had changed in their relationship. Rhonda did everything she could to make Jake happy, but it wasn't enough. She even took a course of hormone therapy, but it became clear to her that he was no longer interested in her, at least not sexually. About 6 months ago, she began to notice changes in Jake that she did not like. He was away from home more often than not, presumably either going out with the guys to have a beer or being busy with something work-related. He was a regional manager for the company he worked for and was often away dealing with one issue or another. In her opinion, he could delegate most of the work, but he just didn't act that way. But that was not all. Several times, she smelled the scent of another woman coming from him as he staggered back into the house. He would either laugh it off and tell her that she was running wild, or he would claim that he worked with some employees from other offices in the area and they just happened to be women. But she knew that this was not so. Call it intuition. Call it what you want. But she knew. Something was wrong. One evening in the bathroom, she took inventory of her condition. At 32, she was a very attractive woman with a beautiful figure. Her long blonde hair fell over her shoulders, framing her pretty face with full lips and deep blue eyes. She flaunted her B-cup breasts and hourglass figure, topped by well-toned legs. She did whatever he wanted to satisfy him. However, apparently, this was not enough for him. One night, not long ago, he came home and she smelled sex and a strange woman. Then she smelled it even more when she pulled down his boxers. She pulled his boxers back on. "What's wrong?" he asked her. "Who is she, Jake?" she asked angrily. "I don't understand what you're talking about," he said. "Don't bullshit me, Jake," she said. "I can smell her vile scent all over you. Who are you cheating on me with?" "No one," he lied. "Bullshit," she said. "Today you will sleep in the guest bedroom. And you will stay there until you can be honest with me. And don't even think about touching me until you've been tested for sexually transmitted diseases. I'll be damned if I let you infect me." There was silence in the house for several days until he finally broke down and admitted that he had sex with one of his colleagues. "You fucking bastard," she hissed when he told her this. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't divorce your ass right now, damn it." "Forgive me," he begged. "I drank too much. This only happened once. Please forgive me." "Just once?" she asked. "Yes, just once," he said. "I'm sorry. This will never happen again." "It's better not," she said, "because next time I will castrate you. But you will still sleep in the guest room until your test results come back. And I still want to know who you were with." Later that day, he told her it was Angela Carlisle from the Dallas office. "Maybe I should talk to Angela Carlisle," I said. "I'll tell her to keep her hands off my husband." "Please don't do this, Rhonda," he said. "This was just a one-time incident, and I could get into big trouble and possibly even lose my job." "It's either this or you lose your marriage," she said. The truth was that she didn't want to divorce Jake. Her parents were strict Catholics who did not believe in divorce, and they taught her that divorce was a sign of failure. No matter how angry she was at her husband, she still loved him and hoped to mend her relationship with him. "I don't have her number with me," he said. Please, Rhonda, she is also married. Then maybe her husband should know what his wife does when she leaves, she said. Wouldn't you like to know if I was playing tricks? He looked at her in shock. He began. What? You decided to earn a little extra money on the side for the sake of revenge? She asked with a grin. God knows I should have. I may not be able to have children, but I can still enjoy good sex every now and then. Maybe this is what I should do. Go and call a couple of big guys to come and fuck me in our bed while you watch. Is this what you want? You wouldn't do this, he pleaded. No, I wouldn't, she said. I'm not going to stoop to your level this time. But God help me if I ever catch you with another woman again. Do you see where I'm going with this? I understand, he said, defeated. He knew she would make good on her threat, and there were plenty of guys in town who would be more than happy to help her teach him a lesson. After that, everything calmed down a little. Either he was on the right track, or he had gotten better at hiding his dates from her. She didn't know what it was and couldn't let the investigator check it. However, she decided to keep him on a very short leash. His tests came back negative, so she let him back into the master bedroom. It was some time before she started making love to him again, and she watched his actions closely. She also found a photo and short biography of Angela Carlisle on his company's website. According to this, she was an office manager in Dallas, married, and had 2 young children. A quick check of the official internet pages gave her a home phone number. A search on Facebook and LinkedIn gave her even more details, as well as photos of her family. The children in the photographs appeared to be mixed race, and she wondered if they had been adopted. She almost called the woman several times, but decided against it, opting instead to give her errant husband a chance to prove himself. By the time this last trip came around, she thought everything was back to some semblance of normal. But she still had a lot of trust issues. After all, this is what deception leads to. It was just after 6 o'clock in the evening when Jake called to tell her that his workday had just ended and he would be having dinner with several representatives from Dallas, along with a couple of their clients. She ate the rest of her meatloaf and watched some TV before going to bed. She jumped out of bed when the home phone rang. Picking up the phone, she looked at the time and saw that it was 1:30 a.m. Who could call at such an hour? She thought. Hello, she said, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Mrs. Green, this is Terry Gadsden, and I'm calling from Parkland Hospital in Dallas, said the woman on the other end of the line. Your husband, Jacob Green. Yes, Rhonda said, sitting down. What's happened? Is he okay? Mrs. Green, your husband was in an accident and was brought here for emergency treatment, Terry said. I can't go into details, but the doctor would like to see you as soon as possible. I understand you live in Wichita Falls, correct? Yeah, I can be there in a couple of hours or so, Rhonda said. It will be wonderful, Mrs. Green, Terry said. Your husband is currently undergoing surgery and may remain there for some time. Terry told Rhonda the address before ending the conversation. She had a sister, Jenny, who lived with her husband in Arlington, a town near Dallas, so she called. Hey, sis, what's so urgent? Jenny asked. This is Jake, Rhonda said. I just got a call from Parkland Hospital. He had an accident and they took him there. Is it okay if I stay with you for a couple of days? Of course, honey, Jenny told her. Come, we will prepare a spare room for you and meet you at the hospital. Rhonda thanked Jenny and hung up. Her next call was to April, her supervisor at the insurance agency where she worked. Sorry to call so late, but I just got word that my husband was in an accident in Dallas and is in surgery, Rhonda said. Oh my God, Rhonda, are you going to go there at this time of night? April asked. Yes, I have to, said Rhonda. Okay, go ahead and take the rest of the week off if you need to, April said. Let me know how it goes. I'll do that, thank you, April, Rhonda said. Having finished the conversation, she jumped out of bed, took a shower, got dressed and threw some things into her travel bag. Making sure that everything was closed and locked, she headed towards the exit. Jenny met her in the hospital parking lot, and the two of them headed to the emergency room. Eventually, they were directed to a waiting area and told that Dr. Kim would see them as soon as he could. Looking around, she saw a man sitting in the room with his head in his hands. She could tell he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. When he looked up, She recognized him from the photos she had seen on Facebook. Fred Carlisle, Angela's husband. She stood up and walked towards him. He looked at her and tears streamed down his face. "Mr. Carlisle?" she asked. "Yes, it's me," he said quietly. "What can I do for you?" "Your wife's name is Angela?" she asked. He nodded his head slowly. "Yes," he said. "She was my wife. Now she's dead. They said she had lost too much blood and had too much damage." "I'm so sorry to hear that," Rhonda said. "Did she have an accident this evening?" "Yes," he said. "How do you know this?" "Was she alone?" Rhonda asked. He shook his head. "No," he said. "She was with some guy from her company in his car." She looked away for a moment, fearing the worst. She saw an Asian doctor enter the waiting room and saw the name on his badge, Kim. She turned back to Fred. "Mr. Carlisle, my name is Rhonda Green," she said. "We can talk later?" "Yeah, sure, what the hell," he said. "I'm not going anywhere for a while." "Okay, Mr. Carlisle," she said. "Once again, I'm very sorry for your loss." He nodded his head without saying anything when Dr. Kim approached her. "Are you Mrs. Green?" he asked. "Yes, it's me," she said. "I'm Dr. Kim," he said. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she said. "Is it okay if my sister joins us?" "I suppose so," he said. "Please, let's go to one of the rooms for privacy." Rhonda motioned for Jenny, who stood up and followed them into a small room next to the waiting area. Dr. Kim closed the door to the room before sitting down across from them. "Your husband is recovering from surgery," he said. "We have stabilized his condition and reattached his penis, but at the moment he is still in critical condition and in a medically induced coma." "Wait," Rhonda said. "You sewed him back on what?" His genital organ," said Dr. Kim. "You know?" "Yes, I know what it is, doctor," she said. "What I want to know is how he ended up untethered." "I'm not 100% sure about this," he said. "Perhaps you should talk to one of the officers who responded to the accident. I think one of them is still here." "I will do so," she said. "You said that my husband is in a coma?" "Yes," said Dr. Kim. "He suffered a significant number of injuries received as a result of the accident. He has slight bleeding and swelling of the brain. His head hit the driver's side window quite hard." "I understand," Rhonda said. "Is he going to get better?" "If he survives the next couple of days, I think so," the doctor said. "Of course, over time we will learn more. But if he does recover, I very seriously doubt that he will recover fully, as a man. In fact, this may be a blessing in disguise, doctor," she said, causing a surprised look on his face. "When can I see him?" "Right now he's in the intensive care unit and he's in a coma, so it could take a few days," Dr. Kim said. "I want to give his body a chance to recover a little before we continue." "I understand you live in Wichita Falls, correct?" "Yes," she said. "But my sister said I could stay here with her for a while." He nodded his head and handed her a business card. "Okay," he said. "Make sure we have a telephone number where you can be reached, and we will call if there is any change in his condition. You can also call the NICU yourself if you want to check on his condition. Don't worry, he will receive the best care possible here." "Thank you, doctor," Rhonda said, looking at the card he gave her. As he left the room, a nurse came in, wrote down her details, and asked her to fill out several forms, including a DNR order, do not resuscitate, just in case. "One of the officers who responded to the scene is here to see you," the nursey said, standing up to leave. "You might want to talk to him. I hope everything works out for you." "Thank you," Rhonda said. After the nurse left, a large Hispanic man in a police uniform came in and sat opposite Rhonda, holding a folder. "Sergeant Hernandez," he said, introducing himself. "Are you Mrs. Rhonda Green?" he asked. "Yes, officer, it's me," she said. "Does your husband Jacob Green drive a green Toyota RAV4? He asked. "Yes, he does," Rhonda said. "What's happened?" "One more question, Mrs. Green," Hernandez said. "Did you know a woman named Angela Carlisle?" "I've never met her, but I know who she is," Rhonda said. "Was she with him at the time of the accident?" Yes, it was her, said the policeman. I, don't quite know how to tell you this. Was he sleeping with her when this happened? She asked. Not exactly, answered the sergeant. But they were so connected. What does this mean, Sergeant? She asked. Connected? How? Please tell me what happened. It looks like she was satisfying him at the moment when his car was hit, he said. You mean she bit off his manly tool when the accident happened? She asked. I'm afraid so, Mrs. Green, he said. I'm sorry. And that's why they had to sew it back on? She asked as Jenny gasped in shock. Yes, ma'am, he answered shyly. According to witnesses, he drove the car unsteadily, crossed the median, and was hit head-on by an oncoming car. Looks like that's when she bit. He was drunk? She asked. His blood alcohol level was below the legal limit, the sergeant said. As far as I can tell, he was simply too distracted to drive safely. And my husband was to blame? Rhonda asked. That's exactly what I'm saying, Mrs. Green, he said. And since Mrs. Carlisle died in that accident, your husband may face criminal charges. It's up to the day. Shit, Rhonda said. What about the other driver? The other driver was pretty badly injured, but he'll be okay, the sergeant said. So what happens now? She asked him. Again, that's up to the DA, he told her. We are still investigating the accident, but it appears your husband may face criminal charges. There may also be civil litigation. You may want to seek legal help. That fucking bastard, she hissed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Green, he said. He handed her a business card with a case number and contact information. You can obtain a copy of the police report by calling this office. Just ask for the case number. If there is anything I can do, please let me know. Thank you, Sergeant, she said, taking the card. After the sergeant left, Rhonda looked at her sister. What are you going to do? Jenny asked. I want to go there and kill that stupid son of a bitch, Rhonda said. I should have kicked his ass the first time I caught him. Has he cheated on you before? Jenny asked. Yes, said Rhonda. I didn't give a damn about principles and bought his bullshit lies. I should have known he would never change. Let's go to my house and get a good night's sleep, Jenny said. Tomorrow we will think about hiring you a lawyer. Thank you, sis, Rhonda said. I appreciate all your help. After they left the conference room, Rhonda stopped to talk to Fred, who was still sitting in the same chair. Mr. Carlisle, Rhonda said, I really regret all this. If there is anything I can do, please let me know. I'll be in town for a few days in case you want to talk. He looked at her with red eyes from tears. Thank you, Mrs. Green, he said. Perhaps I'll pick you up on that. Please call me Fred. I know it's not your fault. It's probably for the best that it all ended this way. What do you mean? She asked. When this happened, things weren't going well between me and my wife, he said. I think she wanted to recapture the thrill of her youth. So you knew what your wife was doing? She asked. Yes, he said quietly. She told me I had no choice but to suck it up and live with it. She said it was just sex and wouldn't affect us in any way. I practically begged her not to date your husband. Yes, he was the one driving, but she was the one who chose to be with him, and now it cost her everything. On the other hand, I guess you could say she died doing what she wanted. At least I won't have to deal with her cheating anymore. I still don't know how I'm going to tell the kids. At least you still have your children, she said, trying to console him. He looked at her with sad eyes. Yes, it is, he said quietly. For a moment she thought he was going to say something else, but he didn't. Please feel free to call me any time, she said, writing her mobile number on the back of her business card. Once again, I apologize. He simply nodded, took her business card, and put it in his pocket. The two sisters left the hospital and went to Jenny's house. The next morning, Jenny called Rhonda and made an appointment with lawyer Durwood Schnablegger that afternoon. According to Jenny, he was a shark who hated traitors with a passion. How do you know this guy? Rhonda asked. My friend got divorced some time ago, Jenny said. He was her lawyer. Trust me, this guy is good. My friend said her ex was lucky he walked out of the courtroom with his ass still attached to his body. Sounds like my type of lawyer, Rhonda said. That afternoon, they went to his office. Rhonda wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she thought she had made a mistake when they walked into his office. He was short, about 170 centimeters, balding, somewhat plump, wearing glasses with thick lenses, like Coca-Cola bottles. In short, no pun intended, he looked like a stereotypical bookworm, the kind of guy who gets sand thrown in his face at the beach. He listened calmly as Rhonda told her story. "And you say he's in the hospital now?" "In coma?" he asked. "That's true," said Rhonda. "Fine. Well, the first thing I think we need to do is reduce your potential financial liability," he said. "From what you just told me, your husband could be facing 2 very unpleasant lawsuits, in addition to potential criminal charges." He pulled out a checklist and handed it to her. "Given that your husband is now in a coma, this is the perfect time to start over," he said. "I need you to come home and take care of the items on this checklist. The sooner the better. I will begin the paperwork for your divorce and should be ready to send in a couple of days. I assume you want to file on the grounds of adultery. Also, try to find out if this Carlisle guy plans to sue. I'll try to find out about the driver of the other car and see if I can find out what the DA is planning to do. Have questions?" "What about my husband's car?" Rhonda asked. He shrugged. "What about her?" he asked. "If the DA plans to prosecute, he'll probably want her as evidence. If he decides to go public, the insurance company will likely tally the amount. In my opinion, this is actually the least of your worries. We'll deal with this later. The first thing we must do is protect your assets." After discussing the matter, Rhonda paid the advance and both girls left the office. On the way back to Jenny's house, Rhonda received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello," she said, picking up the phone. "Mrs. Green, this is Fred Carlisle. Can we meet a little later today?" he asked. Yes, of course, Fred," she told him. "Where would you like to meet?" "At my house, if you don't mind," he said. "Yes, everything is fine," she said. "Is it okay if my sister comes with me?" "Of course," he said before giving her his address. She wrote it down and passed it to Jenny, who nodded. "We can be there in 20 minutes, Jenny said. "Is 20 minutes okay with you, Fred?" she asked. "It's okay," he told her. "See you." "What did all this mean?" Jenny asked when Rhonda ended the call. "I'm not sure," Rhonda replied. "Well, I guess we'll find out when we get there," Jenny said. 20 minutes later, 2 girls walked up the steps and knocked on Fred's door. He opened the door and invited them in. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Can I get you 2 something to drink?" "Coffee? Tea?" "Tea is good, please," said Rhonda. He went to the kitchen and returned with 3 cups of green tea and distributed them to everyone. "Please sit down," he said. The girls sat down and waited for Fred to continue. He seemed nervous about something. "Mrs. Green," he began. "Please call me Rhonda," she said. He nodded his head. "Rhonda," he said, "I know you've been through a lot, so please bear with me." "Of course, Fred," she said. "By the way, where are your children?" "They are with their mother's parents," he said. Rhonda found his deliberate choice of words interesting. "In case you were wondering, they are not mine." "I understand," Rhonda said. "Have you adopted children?" "No," he said. "These are my wife's children. This is part of my explanation. Look, I know your husband was driving that car, and he's technically responsible for what happened to Angela. All day I was followed by ambulance officers who wanted to take care of my case. I told them all to go away and leave me alone. Yes, your husband killed my wife, but I want you to know that I am not taking any action against you." "Thank you, Fred. You have no idea what this means to me," Rhonda said. "The truth is, Rhonda, your husband freed me from 6.5 years of hell," he said. "I don't quite understand, Fred," she said. He stood up and walked over to the small desk, then returned with the photograph. Rhonda looked at him as he handed it to her. It was a photograph of a much younger Angela and Fred. But Fred in the photograph bore little resemblance to the man standing in front of her. The man in the photo was fit and muscular, in contrast to the thin man standing in front of her. "What happened, Fred?" she asked. "Angela and I had this shortly after we got married 10 years ago," he said. We had a great marriage at the time, or at least I thought so. About 7 years ago, she went to the spa for the weekend with 3 of her friends. When she returned, she was a completely different person. And not for the better. She was a complete bitch. It was as if good Angela had been sucked out of my wife's body, and evil Angela had taken her place. She made it clear to me that she would take lovers whether I liked it or not. And she threatened to destroy me personally if I filed for divorce. I started getting letters from something called the Mutual Marriage Insurance Society, but I never responded to them because I had never heard of them. Eventually, the letters stopped coming. I asked Angela about them, but she said she didn't know anything, so I threw them in the trash. 6 years ago, I came home and was ambushed right here in my own living room by a couple of big guys. I tried to fight them off, but they injected me with something. I woke up tied to a chair in my bedroom. Then they put something in my mouth and started beating me with sticks. Finally, Angela came into the bedroom and told me that from now on, things would be completely different. I was forced to watch these 2 guys take turns fucked mine wife. All this time, she humiliated me and laughed at me, calling me a weakling. When they finished, she called me her little cuckold. When they left, she told me that she was in charge here, and I should never question her about anything. Sometime later, I bought a pistol, he added, showing a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The only place I carried it with me was here in the house. I told Angela that if she or her fuck buddies ever tried to do what they did before, I would smash their heads. She believed me, but that didn't stop her. She intentionally had sex with other men and had children with them. I refused to sign the birth certificates because it was obvious that I was not their father. I also got a DNA test to prove they are not mine. She wanted me to raise them as my own, but I refused. I never abused them or neglected them, but I never treated them as my own. I treated them the way I would treat anyone else's children, but not mine. Suffice to say, as they got older, Angela taught them to disrespect me at every opportunity. She went to work for your husband and had her eye on him from the very beginning. Yes, he had sex with her, often. Sometimes right here, in this house, in her bed. But she was just as eager for it as he was, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if she blackmailed him into it. You should know, Rhonda, that your husband has had sex with many women, not just Angela. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. I started noticing changes in my own body about 4 years ago or so. At first, I thought it was just age or stress. God knows there was plenty of that here. Imagine sleeping behind a locked door with a loaded gun under your pillow. Now I know it was something else. I started seeing doctors about this, but they had no answers for me. About 3 months ago, I went to a specialist, and he ran several tests on me. It turned out that Angela was giving me something. I think she put it in my food, and over time this is what happened, he said. Why would she do this? Rhonda asked. It was her way of maintaining control over me, he said. I think it was the same MMAS company that gave it to her. I did some searching and came across a website where guys could report things like this, so I applied. The specialist I met with also reported this, said it was part of a new federal law or something like that. I got a visit from some federal agent who said they had received several reports similar to mine. Did they do anything? Rhonda asked. They checked the doctor's test results and were going to arrest her this week, he said. But she died in that accident. So you see, your husband didn't know it, but by killing her, he saved my life. Oh my God, Jenny said. What are you going to do now? Rhonda asked. I took 4 months off from my job and am going to camp in the north, he said. What are you going to do with the children? Rhonda asked. From now on, they will live with their grandparents, he said. I thought about giving them a choice, either stay with their grandparents or go to an orphanage or live on the street. In the end, I decided to just take them to Angela's parents. Did you tell them what happened to their mother? Jenny asked. Yes. I told them that their bitch mother died in an accident and would never come home again, he said. I know it may sound cold, but you don't know what it was like here. They must have taken it pretty hard, Rhonda said. So it was, he said. They started crying, saying that they wanted to see their mother. I got angry and told them to shut up and get over it. I told them to never forget that life is a bitch, and then you die. Maybe you should write a book on how to explain life and death to little children, Jenny said sarcastically. Look, I know it sounds harsh, but honestly, you won't know what a squad is until you've been in my shoes for a couple of years, he said. So, I assume you're not going to sue? Rhonda asked, trying to change the subject. No, he said. In any case, I must thank your husband for putting an end to my suffering. I understand, Rhonda said. What about your wife's funeral? It will cost a lot of money. There will be no funeral, he said. I donated her body to science. Her parents didn't like it, but it was too damn bad. Maybe smart people will be able to figure out what turned her into such rubbish. Sorry for my language. It's okay, Rhonda said. I understand. So when are you heading north? At the first of the month, he said. This will give me time to sell or burn all her junk and deal with her final expenses. I understand, Rhonda said. Well, I think we better hurry up. Thanks for having us over, Fred. Good luck in your camp. If there is anything I can do, please let me know. Thank you, Rhonda, he said. I appreciate you letting me speak. Good luck to you, too. Thank you, Fred, she said. She stood up, and Jenny followed suit. They got out and drove back to Jenny's house. Now, there is a person who has serious problems with anger management, Jenny said. Perhaps, but I can understand how he feels, Rhonda said. You have no idea what it's like when your spouse cheats on you and doesn't respect you. I think you're right about that, Jenny said. I was lucky in this regard. No, you just have a husband who really loves you, said Rhonda. When are you coming back to Wichita Falls? Jenny asked. I should probably go tonight, Rhonda said. That way I can get an early start on this checklist Durwood gave me. Okay, Jenny said. Just call me when you get there and let me know if you hear anything from the hospital. I will, and thank you for letting me stay, Rhonda said. That evening she made the 2-hour drive home, ate a burger, and went to bed. The next day she began following Durwood's checklist, doing everything he asked her to do. As he requested, she sent him daily updates. A week later, she received a call from Dr. Kim's office saying that Jake was starting to come out of his coma and that the good doctor wanted to see her as soon as possible. She called Jenny, made an appointment at work, then called Darwood's personal cell phone. Good morning, Rhonda, he said when he picked up the phone. Good morning, Durwood, she said. I heard that Jake is waking up and the doctor wants to see me, so I'm going there now. Okay, he said. I also have some news for you. Ronald Schmidt, the man driving the other car, plans to sue your husband for medical expenses, lost wages, and punitive damages. I talked to his lawyer, and from what he told me, they will probably ask for at least $1 million. Damn, Rhonda said. On top of that, the DA told me that when Jake is released from the hospital, he plans to file criminal negligence and vehicular manslaughter charges. Durwood said. Your husband could end up in prison for quite a long time if he is convicted. Okay, said Rhonda. At least it will be out of the way. Darwood grinned at this. Yes, indeed, he will do so, he said. Anyway, the divorce papers are ready to be filed, so let me know when you're in town and we'll get started. Why don't I come to your office tomorrow morning, she said. I have no idea how long I'll be at the doctor's. That suits me, he said. I'll let my administrator know and we'll see you first thing in the morning. Okay, Darwood, thank you, she said, ending the conversation. She loaded up enough for the week, filled her gas tank, and headed south. When she got to Jenny's house, she unloaded her things, said hello to her sister, and then went to the hospital to see Dr. Kim. She sat nearby as the doctor explained the extent of his injuries. She looked at the x-rays and charts and saw that Jake was truly in a world of suffering. Her eyes glazed over as Dr. Kim explained what was happening to her soon-to-be ex-husband. She barely heard him tell her about the surgical procedure Jake would need. Mrs. Green, do you understand all this? He finally asked. Yeah, I'm just trying to process it all, she said. What if he doesn't have this procedure? What will happen? Well, your husband's chances of recovery without this are slim, he said. He'll feel a little better once we do the procedure. But I must warn you that this is still somewhat of an experiment, which means it will be considered an elective surgery, not covered by his insurance, she said. How much is it? He put a piece of paper in front of her with a set of numbers. Her eyes widened when she saw this. "You've got to be kidding me," she said. "I'm afraid not," he said. "Tell me, Mrs. Green, I am aware of the circumstances of your husband's hospitalization. What are your intentions?" "I intend to divorce him as soon as he leaves here," she said. "I also understand that the district attorney has also filed charges against him. But until then, you are still responsible for his medical care," he said. "What do you want us to do?" "It's at my expense, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded his head as she continued. "Well, to tell the truth, I don't have any special feelings for him right now. But he may die if he doesn't do this," said the doctor. "We are all dying, doctor," she said. "Someone told me not so long ago that life is a bitch, and then you die. None of us are getting out of here alive." "Perhaps," he said. "Mrs. Green, I'm beginning to think that perhaps we should find someone else to be responsible for your husband's care. Are there any parents or brothers or sisters here that we could talk to?" "No," she said. "Both his parents are in a nursing home. They have Alzheimer's and don't even remember his name. There is no one else." "I understand," he said. "Please think carefully about this. Try to put your marital problems aside for a while. We are talking about human life here, but don't stay too long." "I'll think about it, doctor," she said. "Can I go see him now?" "Yes, he woke up, but he can't speak too well," said Dr. Kim. She went to his room and looked in on him. It was the first time she had seen him since he left on his last trip over a week ago. He looked terrible in his hospital bed. Most of his body was covered in bandages and casts. His eyes were open, but not much. She walked up to him and looked down at him. "You're in a hell of a mess, Jake," she said. "They told me they sewed your manhood back on, but you'll never be able to use it to its full potential again. Oh, by the way, she's dead. Her husband asked to thank you for freeing him from her. The district attorney is also going to file criminal charges against you. Criminal negligence, vehicular manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and anything else he can come up with. The driver of the car you hit is also suing you for a shit ton of money. And yes, I am divorcing your sorry ass." "I told you I would do this if you ever cheated on me again," she said. I'm sorry," he croaked with dry lips. She shook her head. "You lied to me, repeatedly. You have had sex with several women, killed a woman, sent another man to the hospital and destroyed our marriage, and all you can say is, 'I'm sorry'? Are you kidding me?" she asked angrily. Please," he began. She waved him off. "Shut up, asshole," she said. "I'm done with you. Do you remember what I told you last time I caught you cheating on me? You know? It's time for you to pay your dues. Your ass is grass, and I'm a fucking lawnmower." His eyes widened when she spoke. "Oh, by the way, I talked to the doctor before I came up here. Do you want to know what he told me?" "What?" Jake asked. "He said you were going to die, you idiot," she whispered in his ear. She smiled as his eyes widened and his face paled. "Enjoy hell, bastard," she added before standing up. "Later," she said to him, leaving his room. Rhonda woke up in her sister's guest room when her phone rang. Looking at her watch, she saw that it was 3:30 a.m. She picked up the phone and answered the call. "Hello," she said. "Mrs. Green, this is Julie from Parkland Hospital. I regret to inform you that your husband has passed away. Could you please come to the hospital?" asked the woman on the other end of the line. "Of course, I'm on my way," she said before ending the conversation. She got up, took a shower, and got dressed. Jenny met her in the corridor. "What's happening?" she asked. "It was a hospital," Rhonda said. "Jake died." "Oh no," Jenny said. "Let me get dressed and I'll go with you." The two girls reached the hospital and headed to the area where Jake's room was located. That evening, they met Julie and John Williams, the doctors on duty. "What's happened?" Rhonda asked. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Green," Dr. Williams said. "Your husband had a massive heart attack. He died before anything could be done. We have the documents here to give you his body." "I don't want this," she said. "But Dr. Williams began before Rhonda interrupted him. I said I don't want this, she said firmly. Donate his body to science or something? Well, fine. If that's what you want, he said. Julie will take care of the paperwork for you. Once again, I apologize. Yes, thank you, she said. Later that day, she met with Durwood and told him the news. Well, I think it's good that we haven't filed for divorce yet, he said. Did your husband have a will? Yes, a will and 2 insurance policies, Rhonda said. The term under his job and the whole life insurance policy he maintained outside of work. He also had very little in his pension fund. You know this will make the district attorney's charges moot, Durwood said. After all, you can't judge a dead person. What about Schmidt? Rhonda asked. His lawyer hasn't filed yet, but they still intend to, Durwood said. You know that they can still seize your husband's property. Talk to them, she said. If they are still planning to apply, make them a reasonable offer. Not this $1 million bullshit. I see medical bills and lost wages. However, there is nothing beyond this, and nothing will be finalized until Jake's estate is settled. I'll see what I can do, he said. I'm sorry for your loss, Rhonda, he added, hugging her lightly. She nodded her head and hugged him back. Thank you for all your help, Durwood, she said. 3 months later, Rhonda heard from Durwood that Schmidt's lawyer had agreed to $150,000, a far cry from the $1 million they had originally wanted. So far, both insurance companies have paid out Jake's benefits, and Rhonda has received 2 checks for $1 million. After paying the settlement, Durwood's fees, and Jake's last hospital bills, she still had a lot of money left over. On top of that, the mortgage on their house was paid off, thanks to the mortgage insurance she insisted they get when they bought the house, and Jake's company transferred the $350,000 he had in his retirement fund to hers. After what Jake put her through, she was embarrassed to date again. She was asked out several times, but she always refused. A few weeks later, she went to Dallas to see her sister and brother-in-law. The 3 of them went to a club where they danced and generally had a good time. Looking around the club, she saw a somewhat familiar figure and headed towards him. Fred, is that you? She asked. The man turned around in fear. He was in much better shape than the last time she saw him. He had gained weight and seemed much more confident. Rhonda, is this true? He asked. Yes, she said. You look really good. Are you done with your camp in the north? Yes. I just returned a couple of days ago, he said. How are you doing? Everything is fine, thank you, she said. How is your relationship with your husband? He asked. He died, and I hope he's burning in hell right now, she said with a smile. He laughed with her. Together with my ex, I'm sure, he said. Would you like to dance? I would love to, she said. They danced a few dances together and finally ended up at Rhonda's table, where she introduced him to Jenny's husband. Look, guys, I hope you don't mind, but Fred and I are getting ready to leave. See you tomorrow, okay? Have fun, sis, Jenny said. You take good care of my sister, Fred. Remember, I know where you live, she told him with a smile. I'll do that, don't worry, he said before they left. Rhonda and Fred enjoyed their evening together so much that they began to meet often. It got to the point that they began alternating weekends. Rhonda would go to Dallas one weekend, and Fred would come to Wichita Falls the next. 6 months later, his company moved him to its Wichita Falls office, and Rhonda allowed him to move in with her. They married 6 months later. He understood when she asked him to sign a prenuptial agreement. As it turns out, he received quite a windfall from Angela's insurance company and pension fund, so things worked out well for both of them. After their honeymoon in Hawaii, they decided to sell Rhonda's house and buy something new, something that wouldn't bring back bad memories for either of them. They were both happier than they had been in years, but over time, they realized that something was missing in their lives. Fred, have you heard anything about Angela's boys? Rhonda asked one night after intense lovemaking. Last I heard, Angela's parents adopted them, and they're moving to Florida, he said. Why do you ask? Would you ever like to have children? She asked. Someday, of course, he said. I would love to raise one or two. You know that I cannot give birth to children for you, she said. Does it bother you? Yes, I know, and no, it doesn't bother me at all, he said. So we can't do it the old-fashioned way. How would you feel about adopting one or two? She asked. He thought for a moment before answering. Well, it would be nice to have children whom we could take fishing or picnics to the park, he said. After all, we have this big old house. There's plenty of space there. Yes, I imagine us adopting a child. Really? She asked excitedly. Yes, indeed, he said. I'll tell you what. Let's start calling tomorrow and find out what it takes. She wrapped her arms around his neck and showered him with kisses. Okay, honey, she said. I'll start calling everyone tomorrow. I love you so much. And I love you even more, my little flower, he said, returning her kisses. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.